The Judiciary Committee will come to order, and we're going to get started right away because we have 3 hearings on 3 bills today, each of them related, but each a little bit different. And because we have a number of conferees for the 3 bills who are identified as testifying in person, we don't want to run out of time for the folks on the 3rd bill. So we're going to go ahead and limit testimony for each of our conferees to 4 minutes. And Mr. Vice Chair has a timer, and you'll hear that go off. So please be respectful of the time and everyone else's time, and so you can all get back to the business that you have outside of the committee room on time. With that, then, we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 419 and a brief from the reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. Jason Thompson, Office of Reviser of Statutes. You have Senate Bill 419 and the bill brief in your packet. This is the bill that amends the crime of aggravated endangering a child to increase the criminal penalties when bodily harm to the child results, and also when a child is in certain environments associated with fentanyl-related controlled substances. The statute that is amended is KSA 21-5601. That is our criminal code statute creating the crime of endangering a child and aggravated endangering a child. I outlined the current law in the bill brief, and you can see it there in the bill as well. But that's causing children to be in certain situations that may cause harm to their life, body, or health, or endanger them. It's all specified there in current law. The new additions are added to aggravated endangering a child, and that would be 1, causing or permitting such child to be in an environment where the person knows or reasonably should know that any person is distributing, possessing with intent to distribute, manufacturing, or attempting to manufacture any fentanyl-related controlled substance. And the other new element or way to commit this crime that's added is causing or permitting such child to be in an environment where the person knows or reasonably should know that drug paraphernalia or toxic materials, compounds, or mixtures are stored or used for the purpose of manufacturing or attempting to manufacture any fentanyl-related controlled substance. So those are the 2 new ways you can commit aggravated endangering a child if you enact this bill. The other provisions in the bill that are amended are in the penalty sections. I noted that current law provides that endangering a child is a Class A person misdemeanor. There's no change to that. Current law, it's aggravated endangering a child is a severity level 9 person felony. And if you have your charts from when Scott Schultz was here, you can see kind of where those are on your grid. And then we move to from a 9 under current law would be a severity level 6 under the amended law if bodily harm is inflicted upon the child. So that's one increase the bill provides. And then the other increase would be obviously by adding the provisions to aggravated endangering a child. Whether or not that would meet that law currently, that could be a misdemeanor in certain cases under current law. It could be a severity level 9 already under certain fact patterns. So you might be increasing some from misdemeanor to felony with the fentanyl-related subsection changes as well. So wanted to point that out to the committee, and that would probably explain the bed impact statement that you also have in your packet. The last thing I'll note is it becomes effective on July 1st, publication in the statute book. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Not seeing any. Then we will go ahead with proponent testimony and invite Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach to the podium. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee. And turn on the microphone. And I've asked.
Oh, it was already on. Okay.
I've asked the vice chair to go ahead and start the timer.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Hopefully I won't take the full 4 minutes. I am Chris Kobach, your Attorney General. A couple of opening points. One, we don't believe the fentanyl explosion or the fentanyl surge has peaked yet. The numbers just keep going up. So this problem is not one that's stabilize. This continues to be a growing problem. It's already massive, and that's based on the assessment of the KBI. Number two, we're throwing everything at it we can think of. So, for example, last year we announced that the KBI had acquired 4 fentanyl sniffing dogs. We're the only state in the Midwest to have that resource, and we're making them available to local law enforcement all across the state. They have proven very successful in our work against fentanyl. And third, I'd like to thank the committee for last year giving us an enhancement of the penalty levels. Again, it's a multi-pronged effort, but it is a huge threat, and I don't think any previous drug crisis, is comparable to fentanyl. Couple of points. I won't restate what the law does. You just heard that. The toxicity of fentanyl needs to be reiterated, though. It's 50 times more powerful than heroin, 100 times more potent than morphine, and the manufacturers of fentanyl are more and more frequently doing it in bright colors, candy colors that are designed to be more appealing to young consumers of the drug. It's according to the DEA, they've seized rainbow-colored fentanyl, meaning multicolored fentanyl. Think of Skittles, in 26 states now. It's just truly horrific when you think about how deadly the drug is, and it's being marketed in a way that specifically targets kids. These bright pills are made to look like candy, and then of course you also know that fentanyl is being laced into all kinds of other drugs. Like drugs that are not sold by pharmacies, but they're copycat, versions of everything from Percocet to painkillers and everything else, as well as marijuana. The amount of a lethal dosage, it's 2 milligrams considered lethal for an adult. A smaller amount would be lethal for a child. The most recent data on child mortality due to fentanyl in Kansas shows that 11 kids died in drug-related instances in 2021, which is the latest year that we have complete data available. Of those 11, 9 were associated with fentanyl. This bill, I think, is a narrow bill that addresses a real threat, and that sometimes the individuals who are manufacturing the fentanyl pills are doing so in a way that can expose or endanger children, and this bill creates an appropriate penalty for that. So I appreciate you considering it and hopefully advancing this bill.
Thank you. And I'm not certain if you're able to stay for questions, or do you want to have questions?
If you have any
now?
questions right now, I could, or you could listen to the others first.
Sure. Great. Well, we'll hear from all the conferees then, if
Okay.
that works for everyone. Thank you. Next, we will invite Deputy Attorney General Vic Braden to the podium. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Senator Warren. I'm Vic Braden. I'm the Deputy Attorney General, Criminal Division. Senate Bill 419 addresses the gap in our current aggravated endangering a child statute. With the flood of fentanyl into the state, children are being placed in dangerous environments where exposure to a small amount of this drug can result in serious injury or even death. Senate Bill 419 provides prosecutors with the ability to charge, if evidence warrants, individuals that knowingly cause or permit children to be in these environments. In 2004, the Kansas Legislature addressed a previous emerging crisis involving the endangerment of children, protecting them from being placed in a methamphetamine distribution or manufacturing environment. This bill appropriately adds fentanyl-related controlled substances to the statute and reflects this era's drug crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and have questions after all the proponent testimony. Next, we'll invite Johnson County District Attorney Steve Howe to the podium. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Good morning, and thank you for an opportunity to be here on behalf of the Kansas County and District Attorneys Association. I'm Steve Howe, Johnson County District Attorney. Our association is supportive of this bill. I know in my jurisdiction, I've had 2 instances where children have died as a result of exposure to fentanyl. It is something that is unfortunate, but this type of reckless conduct, we have been able to prosecute in other arenas when family members, like indicated by Vic Braden, expose their kids to methamphetamine. However, we know the lethality of fentanyl and the possibilities that even in the smallest dose of this dangerous drug, children will die. It's not something we want to do, but it's something to protect our children. And so we would ask as an association that this body pass this bill and give prosecutors and law enforcement a tool to enforce reckless conduct on behalf of family members or other individuals who put children at risk. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we will invite Johnson County Sheriff's Office Representative Greg Smith to the podium. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm Greg Smith. I'm a Special Deputy for Government Affairs for the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. This bill, basically, you've heard before in this committee. This is almost identical to Senate Bill 240 that we requested last year. You had a hearing in here, and then that bill got bundled into Senate Bill 238, which was the packaging bill, making it attractive to children. Didn't get heard, didn't get it above the line, got blessed, but then that packaging bill passed. So this bill got struck. Senate Bill 240 got struck from the calendar. And the Attorney General put this bill forth, had a little bit more bite to it than our bill did. So we're happy to support it. In particular, this testimony that I'm giving this morning is not mine. It's from one of our undercover officers that works for the Northeast Kansas Drug Task Force, and they operate in Johnson County, Franklin County, and Miami County. And I'm just going to briefly highlight a couple of things that are in the testimony here. The Northeast Kansas Drug Task Force is multi-jurisdictional, so we work those 3 counties, and we see a significant increase in the use and distribution of fentanyl in all 3 counties. Undercover agents tell me that when they go on these buys, the sellers are telling them to make sure that you have Narcan, because I don't know if my product has fentanyl in it or not. I mean, that's how silly it's gotten. That's how crazy it's gotten out there. The drug seller is telling the buyer, hey, make sure you got Narcan before you use this. We're seeing a huge increase in children being present during these controlled buys. And sometimes these buys aren't done in a residence or a building. The buyer's coming out, or the seller's coming out to meet the buyer out in the open, and they're bringing kids with them when they're doing these deals. So this has become a huge issue. If you look down towards the bottom of the testimony, the last paragraph that talks about March of 2022 in Shawnee, the city of Shawnee, there was an arrest made. A 10-month-old had been exposed to fentanyl and had to be rushed to the hospital, where fortunately the child's life was saved. But the parents were charged with aggravated endangering a child, but then that charge had to be amended because fentanyl isn't mentioned in the aggravated endangering a child. Methamphetamine is. Back when meth was a huge problem, that was put in, and that actually made a dent in the problem. It helped stop it. So adding fentanyl should make a huge difference and allow prosecutors and judges to not be so reticent to make these charges. Again, there are several different examples of things that our undercover agents have encountered. I highly encourage you to read through that and see that. This is a huge, huge problem, and we need your help, and I'm happy to stand for questions at any time.
Thank you. And next, we'll hear from Chief Daryl Atterbury, Bel Air Police Department. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee. I'm Daryl Atterbury, and I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Bel Air, but I'm here today representing the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, the Kansas Sheriff's Association, and the Kansas Peace Officers Association. I have to agree with everything that's been said. This is unlike anything we've seen before. In my over 42 years in law enforcement, a lot of that on the street. I work the street now. And we are seeing more fentanyl than we would ever want to. And the reason why it's unlike drugs that we've seen before, whether it be marijuana, cocaine, rock cocaine, methamphetamine. This is so potent that it's taking the lives of our kids. In my testimony, you see that there were 11 child deaths related to fentanyl in 2020, and then 9 in 2021. Those numbers are going up year by year. The rate of deaths overall have escalated since 2018, and we don't see an end in sight. So we would like you to support this bill as amended for the inclusion of fentanyl, the additional penalties for permitting a child to be in an environment where these dangerous drugs or paraphernalia, toxic materials are located, and then also for the increase in penalty for the aggravated endangerment from 9 to a severity level 6. So I will stand for questions.
Okay. Thank you. We will now open it up for questions from the committee to our conferees, but want to first ask, do we have any other proponents in person in the committee meeting room or on WebEx? Not seeing any, then any questions? Yes, Senator Wilborn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, conferees, for delivering startling information that we're reading about everywhere. I do have a question for General Kobach. If he would come forward, please. Thank you, General, for being here. My question is, can you tell me where this stuff's being manufacturing, how it's getting into our state? Can you opine on that, please?
Yeah, well, as I'm sure many members of the committee are aware, the nation of China is involved in the manufacture of the original substances. Most of the entry into the United States, however, comes over the southern border. The Mexican drug cartels are major traffickers of fentanyl to the United States. It doesn't always come in final pill form, though. There are places in the United States where it has been discovered that the individuals trafficking the fentanyl are actually cutting up the pills, manufacturing the pills in the United States. But the fentanyl is overwhelmingly, almost entirely coming across the southern border from Mexico.
Thank you. Committee, other questions? Yes, Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'll pose this to District Attorney Steve Howe and anyone else that wants to address it. I'm assuming you have seen what the opposition testimony is. The concern is that we're going to classify fentanyl as more dangerous than other drugs. I think we know that the proliferation of fentanyl out there is part of what makes it so dangerous. There's also a concern that they would be overburdened representing these individuals. Could you respond to why it is that fentanyl should receive this, be moved up as far as severity?
Yes, Senator. I've been a prosecutor.
Please identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Steve Howe, Johnson County District Attorney. I've been a prosecutor for over 30 years, and this is different. It's not cocaine. It's not methamphetamine. It's not heroin. All you have to look at is the fatality rates across this country. Nearly 100,000 Americans have died in 2022 from fentanyl overdoses. And so when people say this is just a new rage, no, it isn't, because methamphetamine, even heroin, didn't have the fatality rates that this drug has. And it's continuing to explode, as the Attorney General indicated. So it is different. It's different for those who work in law enforcement and prosecutors' offices. As far as the burden, it is a burden because only in the sense that if we look the other way, what about the children? That's really where we're coming from. These innocent children that are exposed to these drugs. And most of the time when a child gets a hold of fentanyl, they're going to die. Because if it overloads an adult human, what do you think it's going to do to a small child? And this is reckless conduct on the behalf of the individuals using the drug. And so there has to be repercussions in order to save those children. Is it something that we want to do? No, but there has to be some consequences for those acts. And so we're lucky because there is Narcan out in the general public. Then in many instances, those users and their children that are exposed, their lives are saved. But that's the only reason why we don't have more fatalities. So I think this is a measured approach for the worst of situations that we deal with, and we should have the opportunity to be able to prosecute parents or other individuals who conduct totally reckless conduct by exposing children to these drugs.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chair.
Senator.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Senator Gossage.
This would be for the Attorney General. Thank you for being here with us. I too read the opposition testimony and I'm a bit confused, and I will ask them questions when they come up, but thought I would ask the first question of you because it mentions children addicted to. Does one become addicted to fentanyl, or is this pretty much you're going to die? And does it depend on how
I
much
would
they're
imagine
given?
that in most instances, and there may be individuals here who've had more experience with actual seeing the victims and knowing the specific doses, but I would imagine in most instances, because such a tiny amount of fentanyl can be lethal to an adult, and therefore a smaller amount can be lethal to a child, that it's unlikely to imagine a case where a person. I did not read that testimony, so I'm not sure what they're suggesting. If they're suggesting that children become addicted to it, and somehow that would make this bill unnecessary, I think on the contrary, it would make it more necessary. I would also say that the language of this bill has been in place for 20 years. All we're doing is adding fentanyl to it. So there's been no court that has struck down the construct of the bill, the intent requirements of the bill, of the statute as it exists. So I think any objections I would categorize probably as quibbles, because we've already had this language on the books with respect to methamphetamines. We're simply adding fentanyl, and we're tweaking the penalty level a bit. And I have to beg the committee's forgiveness. I need to leave by the top of the hour, so that's about 2 minutes. But did you have another question for me, or did you want to ask somebody else?
Quickly, you just said you hadn't read it, but they were saying we made methamphetamine worse than other drugs, and yet we haven't seen the use of methamphetamine go down. Now we're adding fentanyl to that, and is that necessary? I look forward to hearing their testimony, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond.
I would say the fact that the use of a drug continues to go up doesn't mean that you don't try to deter it and still try to penalize it, especially in this case where you're endangering children. This is endangering the life of another person, a vulnerable person who probably may not have the awareness that there is a lethal substance nearby. So we would love it if every time we pass a crime bill or redefine a crime, you saw a dramatic decline in the use of that drug. Look, chances are fentanyl will continue to increase, even if we do pass this bill, but at least prosecutors will have the tool to punish those who are endangering children.
Thank you, General, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions for the proponents? Yes, Senator Olson.
Just a comment. There's a case that's pretty publicized. It wasn't in Kansas, but it was in Missouri. Happened over the weekend of the Miami football game. There was 3 individuals that froze to death outside. I believe they come back having fentanyl in their system. And so this is really a big issue right now. I'm going to support this bill moving it forward, because I believe it is the new drug of the day. Meth was that drug before, and I still think people use meth heavily, but fentanyl is the drug of the day, and it's very dangerous. And I don't know if you've heard about that case, but 3 men went outside and froze to death because they were taking fentanyl and other drugs together. There was a 4th one that didn't go outside. He slept for a day or 2, which I guess is common when they go to sleep. But, I think this is just, a sad place we're at. And, we got to do everything we can to protect these kids. So I encourage the chair to move this bill forward quick as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Not seeing any. We do have proponent written only testimony in your folder from Bob Stewart, Executive Officer, Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Are there any neutral conferees? Are there any opponent conferees? Committee, we do have opponent written only testimony in your committee documents from James Bales, Board of Indigence Defense Services. And just want to clarify for those following along and state that, today, these hearings on fentanyl are what I would consider a continuation of the committee's work last session on fighting the fentanyl crisis, and appreciate the conferees who have appeared today and submitted testimony as well. And just to clear up, since it was brought up, Senate Bill 238 from last session, I believe this committee did put in an amendment that would also include, if you are manufacturing substances that include fentanyl and you are purposefully making them attractive to children, such as the rainbow coloring and things. I think we did get that into the bill that became law last session. If we could have the reviser or research look into that while we're hearing some testimony today as part of Senate Bill 238, just to make sure that we got that in last session. But if you could take a look at that while we're hearing from other conferees, and do want to thank our conferees for their testifying today and for sticking to our 4-minute rule for testimony. So good job, everyone. Appreciate that. And with that, then we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 419, but also did want to introduce a group that's in our committee meeting room here today that does, I understand, help address the addiction to fentanyl that can occur. And I think, Mr. Wegman, if you want to introduce the group that's here with us today and what they do, that would be great. You might want to step up to the microphone so others can hear as well, and then we'll move on to the next hearing.
Madam Chair, I am Jeff Wagaman with Steve Kearney and Associates. We also represent the Kansas Association of Addiction Professionals, and they are here again this year for the Advocacy Day. So behind me, we have individuals from across the state who treat individuals with substance abuse disorders. So these are the folks that do the good hard work of working with those individuals and try to get them to be clean and become productive members of society. So we're very happy to have them here today. So.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today at the Capitol. Thank you for visiting the Capitol and for coming to see us here in Senate Judiciary Committee. Thank you for the work that you do. Appreciate it. And with that, then we will open the hearing on Senate Bill 413 and ask for a brief from the reviser. It's regarding specifying criminal penalties for unlawful distribution of fentanyl-related controlled substances when distributed by weight or dosage unit.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Again, Jason Thompson, Office of Reviser of Statutes. I'll start with answering your question about the action last year by the committee. You're correct. You did pass out a couple of special rules related to fentanyl in conference committee. A couple of those did find their way into the bill that was enacted. When we get to Senate Bill 414, I'll point out exactly where those provisions are. But if you're curious, it's the final special rule of KSA 21-6805. It deals with appearance or packaging likely to be attractive to minors. So that is current law, and I'll identify it for you when we get to the next bill. It happens to just be in that one, so it was already top of mind. All right, so back to Senate Bill 413. This is the bill, as the chair said, that concerns unlawful distribution of fentanyl-related controlled substances. And this particular version deals with distribution by weight or by dosage unit. That's one of the unique aspects of this particular bill. The statute amended is KSA 21-5705. That is the criminal code statute that makes it unlawful for anyone to distribute, possess with intent to distribute, or cultivate certain controlled substances. You'll see outlined in the current law down in subsection D3 that a violation of subsection A, which is distribution or possession with intent to distribute, if you do that violation with respect to material containing any quantity of heroin or methamphetamine, it's punished at a higher level than violations involving other controlled substances. And I've outlined those penalties both in the bill brief, and then you can also see them in the bill. So what the bill is doing is adding a violation of subsection A with respect to material containing any quantity of a fentanyl-related controlled substance to these higher penalties that already apply for material containing heroin or methamphetamine. So we're just using the current law for those substances and adding fentanyl-related controlled substances to the same higher penalties. That's the intent of that language. Next provision is current law in subsection D4 deals with violations of subsection A regarding material that is distributed by dosage unit. So we have specific provisions that apply to distribution by weight, and then other provisions that apply to distribution by dosage unit. You'll see the penalties related to those are in the current law, and those are not changed. What's added is a new subsection D5, which deals with violation of subsection A, which is, again, intent to distribute or distribution, with respect to something distributed by dosage unit that contains any quantity of a fentanyl-related controlled substance. So the penalties for these will be higher at lower dosage units. That's the long and short of it. So, for example, I'll just give you the highest penalty. So you, under current law, dosage units, it's a drug severity level 1 if the number of dosage units was 1,000 or more. That's under subsection D4, capital D. But under the new law, under subsection D5, capital D, it'd be a drug severity level 1 if your fentanyl-related controlled substance dosage units was 250 or more. So a whole lot less dosage units to get the higher penalty for these fentanyl-related controlled substances. That's what that provision is doing. The final thing I'll point out is that current law subsection E provides those rebuttable presumptions that apply in prosecutions under this section. So the court will presume that you have an intent to distribute if you have a certain amount or a certain number of dosage units of these controlled substances. What's added here is a provision that says possession of 3.5 grams or more of material containing any quantity of fentanyl-related controlled substances will create that rebuttable presumption. Again, this is the same rule that applies to heroin or methamphetamine. So when we added it up above to the heroin and methamphetamine rule, we added it below to the same way that we count that rebuttable presumption. But there's also a new presumption that would apply that's created down here, that 50 dosage units or more would be the presumed quantity for a fentanyl-related controlled substance that's distributed by dosage unit. That is lower than the 100 dosage unit provision in current law. So a lesser requirement to get to that rebuttable presumption for the fentanyl-related controlled substances distributed by dosage unit. So hopefully that covers the main highlights of the bill. I would point out it become effective on July 1st, a publication in the statute book, in case you were curious about that. And I think I'm done, and we'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Are there any questions from the revisor, for the revisor? Senator Stephan.
Thank you. In all the different sections that have weights of substances, is there any reference to any concentration of the active ingredient within the substance? Or is it just mass, be it active ingredient plus inert ingredient in total?
Mr. Vice Chair and Senator, it's an excellent question. I remember when we recodified this code, there was a lot of discussion about how this was going to be written, and the way it's written is that it's this severity level if the quantity of material was this amount. So how that works in the real world is a great question for the folks behind me. My understanding is it's about the quantity of the material, not concentration. We're not really concerned about how much fentanyl was in it. It's the amount of material we have that contains fentanyl. Same for dosage units. It doesn't matter how concentrated the dosage unit is. It's distributed by a dosage unit. That dosage unit counts for the count that you're making. So if it's 200 dosage units, that's what you need. You don't need to know, how much each dosage unit contained. It just has to contain enough of the controlled substance to qualify for the rule and for the crime. So a lot of that has to do with law enforcement and how the KBI tests these substances, and so I'll probably stop there. That's probably as much as I know as a non-expert. So,
are there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll now turn to the first proponent conferee, Steve Howe, Johnson County District Attorney. Again, please identify yourself. We know who you are, but it's part of the record.
There we go. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the the Kansas County and District Attorneys Association. We sponsored this bill because of some of the things we talked about in the last bill, the onset of fentanyl in our communities. And I wanted to talk a little bit about numbers to just put things in perspective. So fentanyl deaths in my county have quadrupled, more than quadrupled in the last 4 years, from 19 to 22. They went from 12 to 55. Heroin went from 10 to 3, which tells you that there's this transition away from heroin to fentanyl. If you look at the Kansas data, in 2019, there were 70 fentanyl deaths. In 2022, it's 412. Again, it more than quadrupled in the state of Kansas. We don't have 2023 figures, but I can almost guarantee that they're going to continue to grow. So that puts things in perspective about why we come before you for this bill. We understand that there's a need for a multifaceted approach. And you've been good enough as a governing body to allow testing strips and Narcan to be distributed to individuals. And I will tell you, from the people that are out on the street, on the front lines, you and your decisions have saved lives. And the numbers in Kansas would have exploded much more than this, but for you allowing Narcan to be possessed by users of the drug. So this bill does not target users. So this most multifaceted approach is, we understand the treatment and trying to change people's behaviors is important. But the second component is the drug dealers, the ones who are selling, and I call it the dealers of death, because that's what it is. People are literally playing Russian roulette with taking fentanyl. And you ask yourself, why would someone do that? And it's because the addictive nature of fentanyl is so powerful that people are willing to risk death in order to get that high. And unfortunately, the vast majority of the people that are doing this are our high school students and young adults. Those are the target areas that we're seeing. Now, when we talk about why we're lowering the weights and dosages below those currently with methamphetamine and heroin, it's because of the small amount of the drug that it's necessary to have its effect. A couple grains of salt is all is needed for fentanyl to have the ability to not only give you a high, but to kill you. And that is far less than anything that we've seen before with methamphetamine and even heroin. And so we're asking to lower those thresholds so we could target the dealers of this deadly drug. We feel like the thresholds and the measurements, we consulted with law enforcement about what those should be, what they see out on the streets. So we didn't just take an arbitrary number, but actually looked to see what we see out on our investigations. We adjusted the weight measurements because of the small amount of drug that is needed to sell in those dosage amounts. The reason why we also included dosage units is because the preferred method, the vast majority of drugs that we're seeing out there that are fentanyl, are what we describe as fake M30s. So they're supposed to look like legitimate prescription drugs, but they are knockoffs. And that's how it's being distributed the vast majority of time to our community and our high school students and young adults. They're all doing those M30s. And so the dosage units are being reduced because that is so important for our investigations to be able to go after these dealers of death. Now, if you look at the amounts that we're asking to do, we are making it at lower threshold amounts than methamphetamine and heroin. But again, this is different. And I know you've heard this before. When we had methamphetamine and crack cocaine, and we dealt with these different drugs that were the rage. But the distinction this time is the lethality. That has never been seen before. And even despite your efforts to help users of the drug save themselves from their own conduct, it is continuing to explode across all of our communities in Kansas. And so we feel like this is a measured approach to give us some teeth to go after these dealers of death, to be able to hold them accountable and incarcerate those individuals that are putting our community at risk. And so that is the reason for this this requested bill. We think it is a good measured approach and enforcement ability for law enforcement and prosecutors. And we ask this committee to pass this bill and allow us to move forward on another part of our multifaceted approach dealing with fentanyl. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents on Senate Bill 413? Not seeing any, then we will open it up for any questions. Yes, Senator Steffen. Yes.
I'm sorry, I heard petty. Thank you. No. Question for whoever would have the answers. I am suddenly interested in concentrations since you brought into the bill mass units, dosage units. And I don't expect you all to have the answers on the tip of your tongue, but I would like answers. I'd like somebody to bring them to me, come talk to me about it, email me. You know, a dosage, you talk about 50 dosage units. Do you all have any idea how many micrograms? Micrograms is the appropriate unit to discuss fentanyl in. Do you have any idea how many micrograms of fentanyl are in a street dosage unit?
Well, see, Senator, that's why this drug is so deadly, because each pill has a varying amount of fentanyl.
Sure it does.
A good example is we've had instances where they've cut them up into fours, and 3 people live and the 4th one dies. So it's...
Yeah, I understand all that. And I think you made yourself very clear. I'm just trying to get a feel for how much you guys really understand the dosing of fentanyl, the therapeutic range,
well,
the toxic range and such.
On the weights, my understanding from talking to our crime lab is what's also unique is you don't see a lot of cutting agents with the fentanyl. So if it is in non-pill form, you're not seeing it cut. Instead, you're seeing it in pretty much a pure form when they seize it.
It's mostly active agent.
Yeah.
I would like access to somebody who could answer those questions, because I do think they're important. Because it also gets into how sensitive is your testing. You could take 3.5 grams of this, and it would be all over the chart. And that's why the people taking it are playing Russian roulette. Exactly, because you have no idea how many micrograms or milligrams you might be ingesting at any one time. But I would love to know more specifics about that. One more question: Do any of you all know what sufentanil is?
I have heard it from my medical examiner. Yes,
but not on the street.
That is really, I talked to my medical examiner about the overdoses and also our crime lab. We're not seeing a ton of that in my jurisdiction. I can't speak for other jurisdictions. Fentanyl in its current form is really the chief stuff that we're seeing out there on the streets.
Are you seeing some sufentanil?
There is occasionally some of that out there. Yes, Senator.
Well, I appreciate your time. I'll look forward to hearing from somebody.
All right.
Thank you.
And I would suggest, Senator, our Johnson County Crime Lab, their unit, I could get them in touch with you. They could talk about their findings and what they're seeing out there.
That's a quick one. Thank you. Is there any fentanyl on the streets that's being produced in the United States?
I will never say never, but I will say probably 99% of the stuff, according to all law enforcement, comes from south of the border. That's where it's all coming from. South of the border. That's where it's being produced. That's where it's being shipped. I mean, that's just the reality. And I don't think it's a political issue because fentanyl will kill you whether you're Democrat, Republican, or independent. And so it's a reality that that's where it's coming from.
One more real quick. So it's coming from south of the border via China, or is it also being manufactured south of the border?
It's being manufactured south of the border. Most of the pills that we see, those M30s, are being manufactured in pill mills in Mexico, and they're not like Pfizer. So their mixing is not such that it's going to have the proper mixture, and that's why it's killing people, is because you get one portion of the pill where all the fentanyl is, you die versus the other people who are taking the pill with you.
And how is it that they're able to determine once they have the pill where it was made? I'm just curious.
Well, it's just through intelligence through the investigation. So the investigators, both federal law enforcement and state investigators, through their investigations, that's where all the fentanyl is coming from.
And we don't see it being manufactured here in Kansas.
It's not like meth, where we had meth labs and those types of things. That's very, very rare. Does it exist? I'm sure it does, but the vast majority of it is done in Mexico.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any. So thank you again for coming to the Capitol, Mr. Howe. Appreciate it. And
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
For the work you do in Johnson County for us as well. Thank you. Are there any neutral conferees? Any opponent conferees? Not seeing any committee. We do have proponent written only testimony from Bob Stewart, Executive Officer, Kansas Bureau of Investigation. Also from Ed Klump, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, Kansas Peace Officers Association. We also do have opponent written only testimony from James Bales, Board of Indigence Defense Services. With that, then, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 413 and open the hearing on Senate Bill 414, increasing the criminal penalties for unlawful distribution of fentanyl-related controlled substances. And a bill brief from the reviser, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. For the last time, hopefully, Jason Thompson, Office of Reviser of Statutes. Senate Bill 414, similar to Senate Bill 413, is dealing with penalties for fentanyl-related controlled substances. Section 1 is amending the same section we were just talking about in Senate Bill 413. That's KSA 21-5705. Again, that's distribution or possession with intent to distribute certain controlled substances. And just like the other bill, this adds the provision in subsection D. Yes, it is D. My apologies. Subsection D3, which is kind of in the middle of page 2, that puts fentanyl-related controlled substances in the same category as controlled substances that contain heroin or methamphetamine. So the same thing that was done in the other bill is done here. What's not done here is anything with dosage units. So that's the big difference between this section 1 and the section 1 in the bill you just looked at. Otherwise, I think they're the same. They both attempt to put fentanyl-related controlled substances on the same level as those containing heroin or methamphetamine. The second section in the bill is the one I was referencing earlier that was amended last year by the legislature. That's KSA 21-6805. This is the section that contains the sentencing grid for drug crimes, and you'll see that grid there on page 5 of the bill. But the main focus of this bill is the special rules that apply to that grid, and they're on the final page, page 8 of the bill. So you enacted 2, the legislature enacted 2 last year. The one in subsection I, the final special rule down there that's not amended in this bill, is the one I was talking about earlier, that makes it presumed imprisonment and 2 times the maximum duration of the presumptive term if the finding is made the substance, because of its appearance or packaging, was likely to be attractive to minors. So that's the current law, subsection I, you enacted last year regarding the rainbow fentanyl or the other packaging and whatnot. So it's there on page 8 if you need to ever reference that. The amended rule in this bill is the one right above it. Subsection H, also enacted last year. This is the rule that provides for presumptive imprisonment and 2 times the maximum duration of the presumptive term if the sentence is for a violation of manufacturing a fentanyl-related controlled substance or a material containing any quantity of a fentanyl-related controlled substance. Again, enacted last year, only applies to KSA 215703, which is manufacturing. What's added in this bill is violations of KSA 215705. That's distribution. That's section 1 of your bill, that crime. But I know it's not all violations. It's only the violations that are drug severity level 1, 2, or 3. So these will only be the higher level amounts of distribution, not the lowest level of amounts of distribution that are punished at severity level 4. So just to clarify, current law is manufacturing gets this rule. Your proposed amendment here would add distribution, but only distribution at severity level 1, 2, and 3, not severity level 4. I think that's the peanut of the bill there. And I'll note it take effect on July 1st on publication of the statute book, and I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. With that, then, we will invite our proponent, conferee, Mr. Ed Klump, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, and Kansas Peace Officers Association. Please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Committee members, I am Ed Klump, here representing the Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, Kansas Peace Officers Association. We requested this bill just as for the purpose it's been talked about all day. The distribution of the fentanyl is where the rubber meets the road. This is the people that's actually going out and putting these fatal drugs into the hands of users. And they deserve our full attention, and they deserve full effect of the law. So I want to talk primarily here, since we're short on time, comparing 414 and 413. Section 1 of 414 does not contain anything that is not in 413. And 413 has the additional things of the change in the dosage units. So those two fit together fine without any problem. So I want to talk about the section 2 in 414, and that is the sentencing provision. And you find those changes on the last page of the bill on lines 11 and 12, I think it is. And what it does is the same thing the legislature did last year for the manufacturing of fentanyl, and that is it makes any violation a presumptive imprisonment violation, and it doubles the maximum sentence that can be imposed. And you'll see that last year you did that for the manufacturing, and you also, in the subsection I that Jason was talking about, that's the same thing that was done there for those offenses. So this is consistent with what we did last year, only here we're attacking the really predominant violators that are getting this in the hands of our children and our young people and killing them, and that is the drug distributors. So those are the main differences that between the two bills. We think they go together nicely. We think the presumptive imprisonment and the doubling of the penalty is an important feature that ought to be included in whatever you move forward with. So, Madam Chair, I think I'll leave it at that. Enough has been said about all the background information on this and what the problem is. I'll be glad to answer any questions on anything, though, that you have.
Thank you. Committee questions? Yes, Senator Stephan.
Thank you. On page 3 of the bill, I don't know if you have it, I hope you do, lines 23 through 26, was any thought given to the possibility of that sort of scenario leading to higher concentrations of marijuana and fentanyl?
Well, the changes on line 22 to 23 on page 2, and then the ones, so you're talking specifically 23 and 24, I'm sorry, on page 3. I'm not sure, maybe the revisor can answer that. I'm not sure why the material containing any quantity of marijuana was put on there. It doesn't have anything to do with the fentanyl. That may have been a revisor revision. I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason Thompson again, not the final time. So this is referenced in some of the testimony, and I had a quandary that I posed to the requesters about whether this was a technical fix or a substantive change. There is some debate over that. It's presented to you in the testimony. That's probably where I should leave it. The current law very specifically talks about any quantity of materials containing these substances. I used the same language. It's what I was asked to do on the fentanyl, so I made it consistent throughout that subsection. If there's debate over whether that's a substantive change, you might want to consider that as a policy issue.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Go ahead, Senator Stephan.
It doesn't quite. I think that was just collateral damage there. The point being that when you start connecting sentences to the size, the amount of the drugs, you invariably are going to put pressure on the drug manufacturers to make it in a more concentrated form. And did you all give that any thought?
I'm not sure. I don't know if I agree with that or not. Whether that would be a reaction to that or not. Why they would do it in a stronger concentration. I'm not following the logic on that.
Keep the mass down. Keep their penalty lower potentially. It's theoretical, but it's something you guys need to have thought through before you advance legislation. Unintended consequences are very important with new statutes.
Well, we do consider unintended consequences. Obviously, you always find something later on that you might have not come to your spotlight. So appreciate you bringing that up to us. We'll certainly give that some consideration.
Thank you. Other questions? Not seeing any. Do we have other neutral conferees? Do we have opponent conferees? Not seeing any. Want to draw your attention to, we have proponent written only testimony from Bob Stewart, Executive Officer, Kansas Bureau of Investigation, and from opponent written only testimony, James Bales, Board of Indigent Defense Services. With that, then we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 414 and thank all of our conferees on our 3 bills today for the work that they do to keep our communities and Kansas safe. So thank you for your work here today and the work you do back in our communities. Before we adjourn, want to also recognize in the committee meeting room today, we do have former Senator Ed Hardy here with us, and he was a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So good to see you, Senator Hardy. Thank you for joining us today. And with that, then we also have Senator Haley. What's his first name? I'm sorry, I said the first name wrong. I apologize, Senator Randall Hardy. So we did not serve together, but I apologize for the name mistake. Apologize, Senator Hardy. So thank you for coming and visiting today. And with that, then, committee, I want to thank everyone for their attention and their work today, and we are adjourned.